An unfaithful husband abandons his wife in her final days and brings his mistress to the funeral. All he cared about was finding out what she had left him in her will. But what he didn't know was that his wife, even after passing, had planned one last surprise. When he discovered what it was, he felt his blood run cold. The pristine hallways of Mount Sinai Hospital in Manhattan echoed with the steady beeping of medical equipment, a sound that had become all too familiar to Emily Harrison over the past 8 months. The late autumn sunlight filtered through the vertical blinds, casting striped shadows across her hospital bed. At 34, Emily's once vibrant features had been hollowed by aggressive chemotherapy, her honey blonde hair long since replaced by colorful silk scarves that her sister Olivia brought her every week. On this particular Wednesday morning, Emily sat propped up against her pillows, absently touching the diamond wedding ring that now hung loose on her thin finger. Her husband James was supposed to have visited yesterday, but he'd called with another excuse about an important real estate meeting that couldn't be rescheduled. It was the 3rd time this month. "Mrs. Harrison?" Dr. Rachel Chen's gentle voice drew Emily from her thoughts. The oncologist stood in the doorway, clipboard in hand, her expression carefully neutral. "Do you feel up to having a conversation about your latest test results?" Emily managed a weak smile. "Of course, Dr. Chen, though I have a feeling I already know what you're going to say." Before the doctor could respond, rapid footsteps approached, and Olivia burst into the room, her designer handbag swinging wildly. "I'm here! I'm here! Sorry I'm late. Traffic was absolutely insane on 5th Avenue. She rushed to Emily's side, taking her sister's hand. At 31, Olivia was the spitting image of what Emily used to look like, tall, athletic, with the same honey blonde hair and warm brown eyes. "Perfect timing," Dr. Chen said, closing the door behind her. "I was just about to discuss Emily's latest scan results." The atmosphere in the room grew heavy as Dr. Chen pulled up a chair and began explaining the newest developments. The cancer had spread more aggressively than they'd anticipated. The experimental treatment they'd been hoping would buy more time wasn't working as expected. Emily listened with an eerily calm expression, while Olivia's grip on her hand grew progressively tighter. "How long?" Emily asked, her voice steady. Dr. Chen's professional demeanor softened slightly. "Without aggressive intervention, 3 to 4 months at most." "I'm so sorry, Emily." Olivia let out a choked sob, but Emily merely nodded, as if receiving confirmation of something she'd long suspected. "Thank you for being honest with me, Dr. Chen." After the doctor left, Olivia turned to her sister, tears streaming down her face. "We need to call James. He should have been here for this." Emily's lips curved into a bitter smile. "He's busy, Liv. Important meetings, you know how it is." "Busy? Busy?" Olivia's voice rose sharply. "You're his wife, for God's sake. And where the hell has he been spending Aunt Martha's inheritance? Because it certainly hasn't been on your treatment." "Liv, please," Emily sighed, though a flicker of pain crossed her features. The inheritance from their distant aunt had been substantial, nearly $5 million. James had insisted on managing it, claiming his background in finance made him better suited for the task. Lately, though, Emily had begun to wonder about some of his investment decisions. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Sarah Powell, one of the newer nurses on the floor, entered with Emily's medication. Tall, striking, with perfectly styled dark hair and expensive-looking scrubs, Sarah had only been working on the oncology floor for a few months. "Time for your morning meds, Mrs. Harrison," she announced with a bright smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. As Sarah administered the medication, Emily suddenly felt a wave of nausea different from her usual symptoms. Running to the bathroom, she barely made it in time. Olivia followed, holding her sister's hair back as she retched. "This is new," Olivia remarked worriedly. "Should we call Dr. Chen back?" But Emily had frozen, a strange expression crossing her face. "Liv," she whispered, "what's today's date?" "October 15th. Why?" Emily's hands began to shake. "I'm late. Very late." "Late for what?" Olivia asked before sudden realization dawned on her face. "Oh my God. Emily, are you saying—" "I need a pregnancy test," Emily said, her voice trembling. "Now." The next hour passed in a blur of activity. Olivia rushed to the hospital pharmacy, returning with a test. When the 2 pink lines appeared, Emily stared at them in disbelief, tears finally breaking through her composed facade. "This can't be happening," she whispered. "The doctors said the chemotherapy. They said it would be impossible." "We need to tell James," Olivia insisted, already pulling out her phone. "No!" Emily grabbed her sister's wrist with surprising strength. "Not yet. I need time to process this." But as Emily lay in her hospital bed that night, alone with her thoughts, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The way James had been acting lately, the missing money from their accounts, the constant excuses. And there was something about Sarah, the new nurse, something in the way she looked at Emily with those calculating eyes. Little did Emily know, at that very moment, James Harrison was signing the check for a down payment on a luxury penthouse in the Upper East Side. Across the table from him, Sarah Powell, who hadn't been a nurse for very long at all, was running her fingers along the rim of her wine glass, a triumphant smile playing on her perfectly painted lips. "To new beginnings," she purred, raising her glass. James clinked his glass against hers, not a trace of guilt on his handsome face. "To us," he replied, "and to Emily's generous Aunt Martha. May she rest in peace." The autumn wind howled outside the expensive restaurant's windows, carrying with it the first hints of the winter to come. But the real storm brewing would make the weather seem calm in comparison to the devastating revelations that lay ahead. The revelation of her pregnancy sent ripples through Emily's carefully constructed world, transforming her final months into something far more complex than she could have imagined. In the days following the discovery, she found herself torn between hope and despair, between the miracle growing inside her and the cancer consuming her body. 1 week after the pregnancy test, Emily sat in Dr. Chen's office, accompanied by Olivia. The oncologist's face was grave as she reviewed Emily's latest blood work. "The situation is complicated," Dr. Chen began carefully. "Your pregnancy is extremely high risk, Emily, and continuing the pregnancy means we'll have to modify your treatment plan significantly. Some treatments will need to be suspended entirely." "What does that mean for her timeline?" Olivia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Chen's silence spoke volumes before she finally answered. "Instead of 3 to 4 months, we might be looking at 6 to 8 weeks, maybe less." Emily's hand instinctively moved to her still flat stomach. "And the baby?" "With immediate intervention and bed rest, there's a chance, a small one, that the baby could survive long enough to be viable. But Emily, you need to understand, carrying this pregnancy to that point would almost certainly mean sacrificing what little time you have left." The weight of the decision hung heavy in the air. Emily closed her eyes, tears sliding down her hollow cheeks. "I want to try," she whispered. "This baby, it's my last chance to leave something of myself behind." Later that afternoon, Emily finally worked up the courage to call James. The phone rang 5 times before going to voicemail. She tried again, and again. On the 4th attempt, he finally answered, sounding irritated. "Emily, I'm in the middle of something important." "James, I need you to come to the hospital. There's something we need to discuss. Something important." There was a pause, followed by muffled voices in the background. "Can't it wait until tomorrow? I'm closing a major deal here." "No, it can't wait. James, Listen, honey, I've got to go. The clients are waiting. I'll try to stop by tomorrow, okay?" The line went dead before Emily could respond. She stared at the phone in her hand, a strange numbness spreading through her chest. Olivia, who had been pretending not to listen, could no longer contain herself. "That's it, I'm hiring a private investigator." "Liv, don't." "No, Emily. This has gone on long enough. He's barely been here for you. He's been making excuses about the money from Aunt Martha's inheritance, and now he can't even be bothered to come to the hospital when his dying wife needs him. Something's not right." Emily wanted to argue, but she was too tired. Besides, a part of her had begun to suspect that Olivia was right. The way the new nurse, Sarah, always seemed to be hovering nearby when James did visit, the whispered phone conversations she'd overheard him having in the hallway, the growing gaps in their joint accounts. 2 days later, Olivia burst into Emily's hospital room, her face flushed with anger and her hands clutching a manila envelope. "You need to see this," she said, her voice shaking. "The PI works fast." Inside the envelope were dozens of photographs. James and Sarah at expensive restaurants, James and Sarah entering a luxury apartment building, James and Sarah shopping at Tiffany's. But it was the last photo that made Emily's blood run cold. James and Sarah kissing passionately outside Mount Sinai Hospital, right under Emily's hospital room window. "There's more," Olivia said grimly, pulling out bank statements and property records. He's been liquidating your inheritance. Nearly $4 million, Emily. He's been spending it on her, jewelry, a penthouse, expensive trips. And get this, Sarah isn't even a real nurse. She got the job using fake credentials, probably to keep an eye on you. Emily stared at the evidence of her husband's betrayal, feeling something inside her shatter. But along with the pain came something else, a cold, clear anger she'd never experienced before. How long? She asked quietly. According to the PI, at least 6 months. They met at a bar right after your diagnosis. She knew exactly who he was, who you were, and about Aunt Martha's money. This was calculated, Emily. That night, as Emily lay awake in her hospital bed, she began to plan. The baby inside her might not survive. She might not survive, but she would make damn sure James Harrison remembered her until the day he died. Over the next few weeks, Emily put her plan into motion. She made several private calls to her aunt's old lawyer, Mr. Davidson, who had always had a soft spot for her. She arranged for new documents to be drawn up, had her will modified, and set up a series of events that would unfold after her death. James continued his pattern of brief, distracted visits, never staying longer than 15 minutes. He still hadn't noticed her pregnancy, though she was starting to show. Not that it mattered. She'd lost the baby 3 days after seeing the photographs. The stress and her weakened body unable to sustain the tiny life within her. She didn't tell James about the miscarriage. She didn't tell him anything anymore. Sarah continued to work her shifts, apparently unaware that Emily knew everything. The woman had the audacity to act concerned, to touch Emily with false sympathy as she administered medications. Each touch felt like a burn now that Emily knew the truth. One particularly bold afternoon, Sarah even attempted to make conversation while changing Emily's IV. "Your husband seems so devoted," Sarah said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "It must be hard for him, seeing you like this." Emily looked directly into Sarah's eyes, her gaze steady. "Yes, James has always been good at playing devoted. Tell me, Sarah, do you like the emerald necklace he bought you? The one from Tiffany's?" The IV bag slipped from Sarah's hands, splashing fluid across the floor. Her perfectly composed face cracked for just a moment, showing the calculating creature beneath. I don't know what you're talking about," Sarah stammered, quickly gathering her composure. "No?" Emily's voice was soft, almost gentle. "That's strange, because I have a lovely photograph of you wearing it, while you kissed my husband outside this very hospital. Green really does suit you." Sarah fled the room, leaving the IV dripping onto the floor. She never returned to Emily's floor after that day, calling in sick and eventually resigning her position. As Emily's condition deteriorated rapidly, she focused all her remaining energy on finalizing her plans. Mr. Davidson visited frequently, helping her arrange everything down to the smallest detail. The old lawyer's eyes would often fill with tears as they worked, but Emily remained clear-eyed and focused. "Are you sure about this?" he asked her one evening, after they'd finished signing the last of the documents. "It's not too late to change your mind." Emily touched the simple mirror she'd asked him to bring, an antique piece with an ornate silver frame. "I'm sure, Mr. Davidson. Sometimes the cruelest punishment isn't taking everything from someone. It's forcing them to look at themselves and truly see what they've become." Olivia, who had barely left her sister's side through all of this, worried that Emily's desire for revenge was consuming her final days. But Emily seemed more at peace than she had been in months. "I know you think I'm wasting my time on this," Emily told her sister one night as they shared a contraband pint of ice cream. "But this isn't just about revenge, Liv. It's about justice. It's about making sure that when I'm gone, James will never be able to forget what he did. Every time he looks in a mirror, every time he sees his own reflection, he'll remember. And maybe, just maybe, it will make him think twice before he does this to someone else." As October turned to November, and November began to fade into December, Emily's condition worsened dramatically. The cancer was spreading faster than anyone had anticipated, accelerated by the stress of the lost pregnancy and her discontinued treatments. James, seemingly oblivious to the change in his wife's demeanor, continued his sporadic visits. If he noticed that Sarah no longer worked at the hospital, he never mentioned it. He was too preoccupied with his phone, with his important meetings, with the life he was building on the foundation of his wife's suffering. What he didn't know was that Emily had already set the wheels in motion for her final act. The papers were signed, the arrangements were made, and the trap was set. All that remained was for Emily to close her eyes one last time, something that, according to Dr. Chen, would happen very soon. As the first snow of winter began to fall outside her hospital window, Emily Harrison smiled faintly, thinking of the storm that would soon engulf her husband's carefully constructed world of lies. The mirror sat wrapped in her bedside drawer, waiting for its moment to reflect the truth back at the man who had betrayed her. One particularly cold December morning, James made an unexpected appearance at the hospital. For once, he wasn't dressed in his usual expensive suit, but in casual clothes, a clear sign he'd come from somewhere other than work. The scent of unfamiliar perfume clung to his collar. "Emily," he said, attempting to sound concerned, "I've been thinking about your treatment options. I've had to make some difficult decisions about the inheritance money." Emily watched him with quiet intensity as he paced the room, launching into a carefully rehearsed speech about investment losses and market downturns. She noticed how he wouldn't quite meet her eyes, how his hands fidgeted with his wedding ring, a nervous habit he'd developed over the past few months. "The thing is," he continued, "most of the money is tied up in long-term investments. We might need to consider moving you to a less expensive facility." Olivia, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, suddenly stood up. "Are you serious, James? Less expensive? You mean like the kind of facility that wouldn't notice if their nurses had fake credentials?" James's head snapped up, his face paling slightly. "What are you talking about?" "Oh, I think you know exactly what I'm talking about," Olivia spat. "How long did you think you could keep it hidden? The affair, the money, all of it." "I don't know what you—" "Save it," Emily interrupted, her voice quiet but firm. "I know about Sarah, James. I know about the penthouse, the jewelry, the trips. I know everything." The silence that followed was deafening. James stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Then something shifted in his expression, the mask of caring husband slipping away to reveal something colder, more calculated. "Fine," he said, his voice harder now. "You want the truth? Yes, I'm with Sarah. Yes, I've been spending the money. What did you expect me to do, Emily? Sit here and watch you die? Waste away my life in hospital rooms? Sarah makes me happy. She makes me feel alive." Emily absorbed each cruel word without flinching, while Olivia looked ready to physically attack him. But Emily placed a restraining hand on her sister's arm. "Get out," Emily said calmly. "And James, don't bother coming back." He left without another word, the door closing behind him with a decisive click. Only then did Emily allow herself to cry, silent tears streaming down her face as Olivia held her. That evening, Mr. Davidson paid another visit, bringing with him the final drafts of Emily's revised will and several other important documents. "Everything is in order," he assured her, his kind eyes filled with sympathy. "The trusts have been established, the donations arranged, and the timing of the revelations carefully planned. Are you absolutely certain about the mirror?" Emily touched the antique mirror's smooth surface. "More certain than ever. James has spent his entire life seeing only what he wants to see in his reflection. It's time he saw the truth." As December wore on, Emily's health declined rapidly. The cancer was spreading aggressively now, and the pain had become almost unbearable. Through it all, she clung to her plan, finding strength in the knowledge that justice would eventually be served. James never returned to the hospital after his confession. According to the private investigator, who continued to send updates to Olivia, he and Sarah had taken a luxury vacation to the Maldives, using the last of Emily's inheritance money to stay in an overwater villa that cost thousands per night. "He's going to lose everything," Olivia said one evening, scrolling through the PI's latest report. "The penthouse, the cars, the investments. It's all in your name. When the truth comes out," Emily finished weakly, "he'll have nothing left except his own reflection, and that will be his greatest punishment." The hospital room had become a command center of sorts, with Mr. Davidson and Olivia working tirelessly to ensure every detail of Emily's plan was perfect. The mirror sat waiting in its drawer, its ornate silver frame gleaming whenever the drawer was opened, like a promise of justice to come. As the year drew to a close, Emily could feel her strength fading, but she held on, determined to see her plan through to the end. The stage was set, the players were in position, and soon, very soon, James Harrison would learn the true cost of his betrayal. The night Emily Harrison died was bitterly cold, with snow falling silently outside her hospital room window. She passed away quietly in her sleep, holding Olivia's hand, the antique mirror tucked safely in her bedside drawer. It was December 31st, the last day of a year that had changed everything. James and Sarah were still in the Maldives when the call came. Olivia had insisted on being the one to deliver the news, her voice cold and clinical as she informed her brother-in-law of his wife's passing. "The funeral is in 3 days," she said flatly. "Try to tear yourself away from your vacation long enough to attend. You wouldn't want people to talk, would you?" The funeral was held at St. Patrick's Cathedral, a grand affair that Emily had meticulously planned. She had specified every detail, from the white roses adorning her casket to the music that would play. The church was packed with mourners, friends, family, colleagues, and even Dr. Chen, who sat quietly in the back, her eyes red-rimmed. James arrived exactly 7 minutes before the service began, wearing an appropriately somber black suit that still carried the fresh scent of department store tags. Sarah had the audacity to accompany him, though she at least had the sense to sit several rows back, attempting to blend in with the crowd. Throughout the service, James played the part of the grieving widower perfectly. He dabbed at his eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief, accepted condolences with a well-practiced look of devastation, and even managed to deliver a brief eulogy that had several elderly aunts reaching for their tissues. "Emily was the love of my life," he declared from the pulpit, his voice thick with manufactured emotion. "She fought so bravely, and I was with her every step of the way." In the front row, Olivia's knuckles turned white as she gripped her armrest, while Mr. Davidson, sitting beside her, wore an expression that might have been a smirk. The real drama, however, began 3 days after the funeral, when James received a call from Mr. Davidson's office requesting his presence for the reading of Emily's will. The lawyer's secretary specified that he should come alone, no guests or legal representation required. James arrived at the law office dressed in another new suit, this one navy blue with subtle pinstripes. He carried himself with the confidence of a man who expected to inherit millions. Sarah waited in a coffee shop across the street, no doubt already planning how they would spend their windfall. The conference room where Mr. Davidson received him was imposing, with dark wood paneling and views of Central Park dusted with snow. Olivia was already there, along with a court reporter and a videographer, another of Emily's specific requests. "Before we begin," Mr. Davidson said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses, "Mrs. Harrison left explicit instructions that this proceeding be recorded in its entirety. I trust you have no objections?" James waved his hand dismissively. "Of course not. Shall we get on with it?" Mr. Davidson opened an elegant leather folder and began to read, "I, Emily Catherine Harrison, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." What followed was nothing short of theatrical. First came the small bequests, jewelry to cousins, books to friends, her collection of art to various museums. Then Mr. Davidson cleared his throat and moved on to the main event. "Regarding the remainder of my estate, including all funds inherited from my late Aunt Martha Harrison, all properties purchased with said funds, and all investments made thereof." James leaned forward slightly, a hungry gleam in his eyes. "I hereby bequeath the entirety of these assets, valued at approximately $4 million, to be divided equally among the following charitable organizations: the American Cancer Society, Mount Sinai Hospital's Oncology Research Department, and the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence." The color drained from James's face. "What? Furthermore," Mr. Davidson continued, seemingly oblivious to James's distress, "I direct that all properties purchased with my inheritance, including but not limited to the penthouse apartment at 740 Park Avenue, be immediately liquidated, with proceeds going to the aforementioned charities." "This is ridiculous," James sputtered, rising from his chair. "She can't do this. That money was meant for me. I'm her husband." "Please sit down, Mr. Harrison. There's more." James collapsed back into his chair, his carefully maintained facade crumbling. "To my husband, James Alexander Harrison," Mr. Davidson read, his voice taking on an almost theatrical quality. "I leave 2 items. First, this letter, to be read immediately." He pulled out a cream-colored envelope and handed it to James, who took it with trembling hands. "And second," Mr. Davidson continued, as Olivia reached under the conference table and produced a familiar wrapped package, "this mirror." James stared at the antique mirror as Olivia placed it before him, its silver frame gleaming under the office lights. With shaking fingers, he opened Emily's letter and began to read aloud, as per Mr. Davidson's instruction. "My dearest James, by the time you read this, I will be gone, and you will be discovering that your carefully laid plans have crumbled to dust. Yes, I knew about Sarah. I knew about the penthouse, the jewelry, the vacations. I knew everything. I also knew about the baby, our baby, that I lost while you were buying emeralds for your mistress. The child you never knew about because you were too busy building a new life on the foundation of my death to notice that I was carrying your child. But this letter isn't about punishment, James. It's about reflection. The mirror I've left you is very special to me. It belonged to my grandmother, who gave it to my mother, who gave it to me. It's seen 3 generations of women in my family face their truths, both beautiful and ugly. Now it's your turn. Every morning when you wake up, I want you to look into this mirror. Really look. See the man who could leave his dying wife alone in a hospital while he romanced a fake nurse. See the man who could spend his wife's inheritance on trinkets for his mistress while she fought for her life. See the man who lost the chance to be a father because he was too selfish to be a husband. The mirror will never lie to you, James, even though you've spent your entire life lying to yourself. And maybe, just maybe, one day you'll look into it and finally see yourself the way I saw you in the end. Don't bother looking for the money. It's gone. Don't bother trying to contest the will. Mr. Davidson has made it ironclad. Don't bother running to Sarah. She'll be gone too, once she realizes there's nothing left for her to take. All you have now is your reflection, James. I hope you learn to live with it. With all the love I once had, Emily." The silence that followed was absolute. James stared at the letter, then at the mirror, his face a mask of horror as the full implications of his situation sank in. "This is impossible," he whispered. "The money, the penthouse, is being seized as we speak," Mr. Davidson informed him calmly. "Your joint accounts have been frozen, and the property management company has been notified of the change in ownership. Miss Powell has already been served with eviction papers." As if on cue, James's phone began to buzz. Sarah's name flashed on the screen, accompanied by a series of increasingly frantic text messages. "James, there are people at the penthouse with papers. They're saying we have to leave immediately. What's happening to our accounts? James, answer me." James's world continued to unravel in that conference room as Mr. Davidson methodically explained the full extent of Emily's arrangements. Not only had she distributed her inheritance, but she had also documented every penny James had spent on Sarah, every fraudulent transaction, every attempt to hide money. "By the way," Olivia added, her voice dripping with satisfaction, "the hospital board has been very interested in our documentation regarding Sarah's falsified nursing credentials. The police are probably speaking with her right now." James slumped in his chair, his expensive suit suddenly seeming to hang loose on his frame. He picked up the mirror with trembling hands, staring at his reflection. For the first time, he seemed to really see himself, not the successful businessman he pretended to be, but the fraudulent, unfaithful husband he had become. "There must be something left," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "The house in the Hamptons, my investment accounts." "The house was purchased with Emily's inheritance," Mr. Davidson explained patiently. "As for your personal accounts, well, it seems most of your money went to maintaining a rather expensive lifestyle with Miss Powell. The credit card statements are quite revealing." James's phone continued to buzz incessantly. Sarah's messages grew increasingly desperate. "The bank says our accounts are frozen. They're saying the credit cards are cancelled. James, I'm being served with legal papers about fraud charges. Where are you?" Olivia watched her brother-in-law's unraveling with cold satisfaction. She pulled out one final envelope from her bag. "Emily left something else for you to see, James. She wanted you to know exactly what you threw away." Inside the envelope were ultrasound photos, grainy black and white images of the baby that never had a chance to live. The date stamp showed they were taken just days after Emily had discovered James's betrayal. "She was carrying your child while you were buying Sarah that Cartier bracelet," Olivia said softly. "She lost the baby the day after she saw the photos of you two together outside her hospital room. She never told you because you never gave her the chance." James stared at the ultrasound photos, his hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped them. In the mirror's reflection, he could see his face crumpling, the reality of what he had done finally hitting him with full force. Mr. Davidson cleared his throat. "There's one more thing. Emily made a video statement before she passed. She requested it be played now. The videographer set up a screen, and suddenly Emily's face appeared before them. She was clearly near the end, her features gaunt, but her eyes bright with purpose. Her voice, though weak, carried an unmistakable strength. "James, if you're watching this, then everything has gone according to plan. You're probably angry, probably feeling betrayed. Good. Now you know how it feels. But this isn't just about revenge. This is about justice, about consequences, about looking in the mirror and facing the truth. I loved you, James. I loved you enough to want to bring your child into this world, even as I was leaving it. But you couldn't even give me the dignity of honesty in my final months. Instead, you made me watch as you built a new life with someone else, using my death as your stepping stone. The mirror I've left you belonged to the strongest women I've known. They used it to face their truths, to gather their strength, to remake themselves when life broke them. Now it's yours. Use it well. And remember, every time you look into it, that your reflection is all you have left of the life you threw away." The video ended, and the room fell into silence once more. Outside, snow continued to fall over Manhattan, covering the city in a blank white canvas. But inside that conference room, James Harrison's world had turned permanently dark. His phone had stopped buzzing. A quick glance showed a final message from Sarah. "Don't bother calling. I'm done. You're not worth the fraud charges." James picked up the mirror again, staring into it as if hoping his reflection might show him something different, something better than the truth. But Emily had been right. Mirrors don't lie. And in that moment, James Harrison finally saw himself clearly, a man who had destroyed everything he had in pursuit of a fantasy that had evaporated like morning mist. "The car service is waiting downstairs," Mr. Davidson said quietly. "They'll take you wherever you need to go. Though I should mention, the lease on your apartment was in Emily's name. Those papers have been served as well." 2 months after Emily's death, James Harrison sat in a small studio apartment in Queens, a far cry from the luxury penthouse he'd shared with Sarah. The antique mirror hung on the wall opposite his bed, exactly where he could see it first thing every morning and last thing every night, just as Emily had intended. The aftermath of the will reading had been swift and merciless. Sarah had disappeared completely, leaving behind only the lingering scent of her expensive perfume and a series of increasingly hostile voicemails before she'd blocked his number entirely. The police had questioned her about her fraudulent nursing credentials, but she'd managed to flee to Mexico before they could press charges. James's professional life had imploded spectacularly. Word of his behavior during Emily's illness had spread through Manhattan's tight-knit real estate circles. Former clients distanced themselves, partners dissolved their associations, and his reputation, once golden, was now irreparably tarnished. Today, he was preparing for his first job interview in 20 years. Not for a prestigious position in real estate development, but for an entry-level sales position at a small property management firm in Brooklyn. The suit he wore was one of the few things he'd managed to keep from his previous life, though it hung loose on his frame now. Before leaving, he did what he'd done every morning since receiving Emily's letter. He stood before the mirror and really looked at himself. "What do you see?" he whispered, echoing the question his court-mandated therapist had taught him to ask. The therapist had been Olivia's idea, part of her own journey toward healing. She'd told him about the position in Brooklyn too, though she still couldn't bring herself to speak to him directly. The reflection stared back. A man in his early 40s, graying at the temples, lines etched deeply around his mouth and eyes. But it was the eyes themselves that had changed the most. The arrogant gleam was gone, replaced by something darker, more haunted. His phone buzzed. A text from his younger sister, Kate. She was the only family member still speaking to him, and even she kept him at arm's length. "Don't forget to eat something before the interview. And James, remember what Dr. Patterson said about owning your story. Dr. Patterson, his therapist, had been working with him on accountability. No more excuses, no more deflections, no more carefully crafted narratives to hide behind. Just the raw, ugly truth of what he'd done. The subway ride to Brooklyn was a new experience for a man who'd once refused to travel anywhere without his private car service. He found himself studying his fellow passengers, wondering about their stories, their struggles, their losses. He'd never done that before, never really looked at people beyond what they could offer him. At one stop, a young woman got on, clearly in the late stages of pregnancy. Something about her reminded him of Emily, of the ultrasound photos he now kept in his wallet. As the train lurched, she stumbled slightly. James stood immediately, offering his seat. "Thank you," she said, smiling tiredly. "Not many people notice anymore." "I notice now," he replied softly, more to himself than to her. "I notice everything now." The interview was scheduled at a modest office building in Dumbo. James arrived early, sitting in a small coffee shop across the street to gather his thoughts. The last time he'd been in Brooklyn had been to scout potential development sites, properties he'd planned to buy and flip using Emily's money. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a reminder from his therapy app. Daily reflection. What truth are you facing today? James pulled out his wallet, removing the ultrasound photos he carried everywhere now. They were creased from handling, the edges worn soft. He'd asked Olivia through Kate if she had any others. She'd sent him a USB drive containing hundreds of photos of Emily throughout her illness, moments he should have been there for but wasn't. "Mr. Harrison?" The receptionist's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "They're ready for you now." The interview room was small, with views of the Manhattan Bridge through grimy windows. 3 people sat at a folding table: Tom Chen, the company owner, Maria Rodriguez, the HR director, and to James's surprise, David Turner, a former client he'd worked with in his previous life. "James," David said, his expression unreadable, "I didn't expect to see your name on our candidate list." "I didn't expect to be on it," James replied honestly, "but here we are." "Indeed," David leaned forward. "Why don't you tell us why you're here?" "And James, the real reason, not the polished version." James looked at each face around the table, then took a deep breath. Dr. Patterson's words echoed in his mind. "Your story is ugly, but it's yours. Own it." "I'm here because I destroyed my life," he began, his voice steady. "I betrayed my dying wife in the worst possible way. I squandered millions of dollars that weren't mine to spend. I became someone I can barely look at in the mirror, though I have to every day, because my wife made sure of that in her will." The room was silent as James continued, laying out every ugly detail of his downfall. He watched their expressions shift from shock to disgust to something approaching understanding as he described his ongoing therapy, his attempts to make amends, his daily struggles with the mirror that forced him to face himself. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," James concluded. "I don't deserve it. What I'm asking for is a chance to start over, to be someone different than the man I see in that mirror every morning." David Turner leaned back in his chair, studying James with a mixture of contempt and curiosity. "Why should we trust you? Your past behavior shows a complete lack of ethics and moral compass." "You shouldn't trust me," James replied. "Not yet. I haven't earned it. But I will every day if you give me the opportunity." After the interview, James walked along the Brooklyn waterfront, watching Manhattan's skyline sparkle in the winter sunlight. His phone buzzed with a message from Tom Chen. "We need to discuss some additional details. Can you come back tomorrow?" That evening, as James sat in his studio apartment eating takeout from the Chinese restaurant downstairs, he pulled out his therapy journal. Dr. Patterson had insisted he document his journey, not for anyone else to read, but as another form of reflection. "Day 67 without Emily," he wrote. "I dreamed about her last night. Not the Emily from the end, thin and angry and knowing everything, but the Emily from the beginning, the one who used to laugh at my terrible jokes and believed in me more than I deserved. In the dream, she was holding our baby, the one we lost, the one I never knew about until it was too late. She didn't say anything. She just looked at me with those eyes that always saw right through me, even when I couldn't see myself." A knock at his door interrupted his writing. When he opened it, he found Olivia standing there, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Kate told me about your interview," she said without preamble. "I thought you should have these." She thrust a box into his hands and turned to leave. "Olivia, wait," James called after her. "I know it doesn't mean anything, but I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." She paused, not turning around. "You're right. It doesn't mean anything. But Emily would want you to have those things. She saved everything, you know. Every movie ticket, every birthday card, every stupid little note you ever wrote her. She believed in you until the end. That was her tragedy." After she left, James opened the box with trembling hands. Inside were photographs, letters, and small mementos from his life with Emily. At the bottom was a diary, Emily's diary from her time in the hospital. He read through it all night, tears streaming down his face as he discovered the wife he'd never really known. She wrote about her hopes for the baby, her fears about death, her growing suspicions about his betrayal. The final entry was dated just 3 days before her death. "Dear James, by the time anyone reads this, I'll be gone. The mirror I'm leaving you isn't just about punishment, though God knows you deserve that. It's about hope. Hope that somewhere inside the man who could betray me so completely is still the man I fell in love with. The man who used to bring me coffee in bed and dance with me in the kitchen. The man who promised to love me in sickness and in health. I'm not leaving you the mirror to torture you, James. I'm leaving it to save you, because sometimes we need to lose everything to find ourselves again. Love always, Emily." The next morning, James returned to the property management office. Tom Chen was waiting for him alone. "We've talked it over," Tom said. "David was against hiring you. Perea was on the fence, but I believe in second chances with conditions. You'll start at the bottom, minimum wage. Any complaint, any hint of impropriety, and you're done. And you'll need to share your story with our team. All of it. They need to understand who they're working with." James nodded, accepting each condition without argument. As he left the office with his new employee handbook, he caught his reflection in the building's glass doors. For the first time since Emily's death, he didn't immediately look away. That evening he sat down at his small desk and began to write, "Dear Emily, today I started over. Not because I want to, but because you made it impossible to continue being the man I was. The mirror you left me isn't just reflecting my face anymore, it's reflecting my soul. And maybe, just maybe, that's beginning to change too. I'll never forgive myself for what I did to you. I'll never stop regretting the family we could have had, but I promise you this. Every day I'll look in that mirror and try to be better than I was the day before. Not for me, but for you. For the baby we lost. For the man you always believed I could be. Forever sorry, James." 1 year after Emily's death, James stood in front of the mirror in his studio apartment, adjusting the tie on his newly purchased suit. It wasn't designer label anymore. Those days were long gone. But it was clean and professional, appropriate for the event ahead. Today marked the grand opening of the Emily Harrison Memorial Wing at Mount Sinai Hospital. Funded by the money she'd left to the oncology department, James had been invited, not as a guest of honor, but as a cautionary tale. Part of his therapy and redemption journey had involved speaking to medical ethics classes about patient vulnerability and betrayal of trust. When the hospital board heard about his presentations, they decided his story should be part of the opening ceremony. His phone buzzed with a text from Kate. "Are you sure you want to do this? It's not too late to back out." James looked at his reflection one last time. The past year had aged him considerably. His hair was more grey than brown now, and the lines around his eyes had deepened. But there was something different in his gaze, something that hadn't been there before. Purpose, perhaps, or maybe just the weight of genuine remorse. "I'm sure," he texted back. "Emily would want me to be there. Not for me, but for the truth." The ceremony was scheduled for noon, but James arrived at Mount Sinai 2 hours early. He wanted to walk the familiar halls one last time, to remember everything he'd tried so hard to forget during Emily's illness. As he passed the oncology floor where Emily had spent her final months, he saw a familiar face. Dr. Rachel Chen, Emily's oncologist. She was speaking with a young couple, her expression compassionate but serious. James hung back, watching the scene play out. The woman was clearly in the early stages of cancer treatment, her head wrapped in a colorful scarf similar to the ones Emily used to wear. Her husband held her hand tightly, his face a mask of concern and love. The sight hit James like a physical blow. That should have been him with Emily, present, concerned, loving. Instead, he'd been planning vacations with Sarah, spending Emily's money on luxuries while she fought for her life alone. "Mr. Harrison?" He turned to find Dr. Chen standing behind him, her expression guarded. "Dr. Chen, I was just... I know why you're here," she said quietly. "The ceremony. I'm speaking too." She paused, studying his face. "You look different." "I am different," he replied. "Too late, but different." Dr. Chen nodded slowly. "Emily used to talk about you, you know. Even after she knew about the affair, she would tell me about the man you used to be, before money and success changed you. She never stopped believing that man was still in there somewhere." James felt tears pricking at his eyes. "I didn't deserve her faith." "No," Dr. Chen agreed. "You didn't. But that's the thing about faith, Mr. Harrison. It's not about deserving. It's about believing in possibility." She checked her watch. "The ceremony starts in 2 hours. Are you ready to face everyone?" The grand opening ceremony was held in the hospital's main auditorium. The room was packed with donors, medical staff, and media representatives. In the front row sat Olivia, who had spearheaded much of the memorial wing's development. She didn't look at James as he took his assigned seat near the back. The hospital's chief of medicine opened the proceedings with a speech about progress and hope. Then came Dr. Chen, who spoke about Emily's courage during her treatment. Finally, it was James's turn. As he walked to the podium, a hush fell over the crowd. Many of them knew his story. It had made headlines in the local papers when everything fell apart. The wealthy real estate developer who betrayed his dying wife spent her inheritance on his mistress, only to lose everything in an act of poetic justice. James placed his hands on the podium, taking a deep breath. In his pocket was the worn ultrasound photo he always carried now. He'd added something else today, the last photo ever taken of Emily, smiling weakly from her hospital bed, her eyes still somehow full of light. "My name is James Harrison," he began, his voice steady, "and I am here today not as a success story but as a warning. A year ago I stood in this very hospital, in a room upstairs, and made the conscious decision to betray the person who needed me most. I had everything," James continued, his voice echoing through the silent auditorium. "A successful career, a beautiful home, and most importantly, a wife who loved me unconditionally. Emily was the kind of person who saw the best in everyone, especially me, even when I gave her every reason not to." He pulled out the hospital photo of Emily, holding it up for the audience to see. "This is the last photo taken of my wife. While this picture was being taken, I was across town picking out jewelry for my mistress with Emily's inheritance money. While Emily was fighting for her life in this hospital, I was planning a future with another woman. While she was carrying our unborn child, a child I never knew about until after her death, I was betraying every vow I ever made to her." In the front row, Olivia had finally turned to look at him, her expression unreadable. Next to her sat Mr. Davidson, the lawyer who had helped Emily orchestrate her final act of justice. "Emily left me 2 things in her will," James continued, his voice growing hoarse with emotion. "A letter and a mirror. The letter told me the truth about myself, truths I'd been avoiding for years. And the mirror. The mirror was her masterstroke, because she knew that my real punishment wouldn't be losing the money, or the lifestyle, or even my reputation. It would be having to look at myself every day and see what I'd become." He paused, pulling out the ultrasound photo. "This is the child we lost. Emily was carrying this baby while I was destroying our marriage. She lost it the day she discovered my betrayal. Another life I'm responsible for ending." The auditorium remained deathly quiet. In the back, several reporters were frantically taking notes. The Emily Harrison Memorial Wing isn't just about providing care for cancer patients. It's about protecting them when they're at their most vulnerable. It's about remembering that behind every diagnosis is a human being who deserves loyalty, love, and respect. Emily understood that. She lived it. And in her final act, she made sure her legacy would help others when they need it most. James's voice cracked as he continued. "I work in Brooklyn now, in a small property management firm. Every morning I look in Emily's mirror before I leave for work. Every evening I look in it again before I go to bed. And slowly, very slowly, I'm starting to see something different in my reflection. Not redemption, I don't deserve that. But maybe something like understanding. Understanding of what I lost, what I threw away, and what I can never make right." He noticed movement in the audience. Sarah had slipped into the back of the auditorium. She looked different now, less polished, more real. Their eyes met briefly before she looked away. "Emily's final gift to me wasn't punishment, though I deserved that. It was the chance to face myself, truly face myself every single day, to see not just who I was, but who I could have been, who I might still become." Tears were flowing freely now, both in the audience and on stage. James pulled out Emily's diary, opening it to the last page. Emily wrote something in her final days that I'd like to share. She wrote, "Love isn't about grand gestures or expensive gifts. It's about being there. It's about choosing to stay when leaving would be easier. It's about seeing the best in someone, even when they can't see it in themselves." He closed the diary carefully. "I failed at all of those things. I chose the easy path. I chose luxury over loyalty, comfort over commitment, and in doing so, I lost something far more precious than money or status. I lost the chance to be the man Emily always believed I could be. In the front row, Olivia was crying openly now. Next to her, Dr. Chen reached over to squeeze her hand. This wing will serve thousands of patients in the years to come. They'll receive treatment here, find hope here, maybe even healing. But I hope they'll also find something else, the kind of compassion and dignity that Emily showed even in her darkest moments. Because while I was busy betraying her, she was busy planning how her suffering could help others. James stepped away from the podium, but then turned back for one final thought. There's a mirror in my apartment that shows me who I am, but in every reflection in this building, every window, every shiny surface, I hope people see who they could be. That was Emily's gift, not just to me, but to everyone whose life she touched. As he returned to his seat, the applause was scattered and uncertain. This wasn't the kind of speech people knew how to react to, but reaction wasn't the point. Truth was. After the ceremony, as people filed out of the auditorium, Sarah approached him. She looked older, more worn, but somehow more authentic than she had during their affair. "I heard you were working in Brooklyn now," she said quietly. "Property management." "Entry level," he replied. She nodded. "I'm in New Jersey, teaching nursing. Legitimate this time. Actually went back to school for it." "Good. That's good." They stood in awkward silence for a moment, before Sarah spoke again. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't—" "No," James interrupted firmly. "I don't. Because wondering about that means wondering if there was ever a right way to do the wrong thing. There wasn't." Sarah nodded again, understanding. "The mirror," she said. "The one Emily left you. Do you still have it?" "It's the first thing I see every morning and the last thing I see every night." "Does it help?" James thought about it for a moment. "It doesn't make anything better. It doesn't fix what we did, but it makes sure I never forget. And maybe that's the point." As Sarah walked away, Olivia approached. It was the closest they'd been to each other in months. "Emily would have appreciated the speech," she said stiffly. "Not for the apology, but for the truth." "I don't expect forgiveness," James replied. "Good, because you're not getting it." She paused. "But Emily believed in second chances. Not second chances at what you had. That's gone forever. But second chances at being someone different, someone better." She handed him an envelope. Inside was a key. "The house in Connecticut," she explained. "The one Emily loved. I'm selling it. I thought you might want to say goodbye to it first. Emily was happy there before everything. Maybe you need to see it one last time." The drive to the Connecticut house took James through winding country roads dusted with early spring snow. It had been nearly 18 months since Emily's death, and the world had moved on in ways both subtle and profound. The Emily Harrison Memorial Wing was now fully operational, helping dozens of families navigate their cancer journeys. James's small apartment in Queens had slowly become something like a home, and the mirror, Emily's final gift, had become less of a punishment and more of a daily reminder. He pulled up to the familiar white colonial house just as the sun was setting. This had been their weekend retreat, the place where they'd planned to retire someday. Emily had loved the garden, spending countless hours nurturing her roses and planning future landscaping projects she'd never get to complete. The key felt heavy in his hand as he approached the front door. Inside, the house was exactly as they'd left it that last summer before Emily's diagnosis. Her gardening magazine still sat in a neat stack on the coffee table. Her favorite throw blanket remained draped over the armchair by the window. The air smelled faintly of the lavender sachets she used to make and hide in drawers throughout the house. James moved through the rooms slowly, memories washing over him with each step. The kitchen where they used to cook Sunday breakfast together. The study where Emily would grade papers from her literature classes while he reviewed property contracts. The sunroom where she'd first told him about her cancer and where he'd promised to be there for her. A promise he'd broken in the worst possible way. Upstairs, he found himself standing in the doorway of what was supposed to be the nursery. They'd talked about having children for years, always saying someday until someday ran out. Now, knowing about the baby they'd lost, the empty room felt like another accusation. His phone buzzed. A text from his therapist, Dr. Patterson. "Remember why you're there. Not to punish yourself, but to face the truth and move forward." In the master bedroom, James found Emily's diary from before her illness. It was different from the hospital diary he now carried with him. This one was full of life and hope and future plans. The last entry was dated just 3 days before her diagnosis. James has been distant lately. Work, he says. Always work. But there's something else. Something he's not telling me. I see him checking his phone more often, smiling at messages I'm not supposed to notice. I should be worried, but I trust him. After 15 years together, how could I not? Besides, we're going to start trying for a baby soon. He's going to be such a wonderful father. The words blurred as tears filled his eyes. He sat heavily on the edge of the bed, their bed, and pulled out the mirror from his messenger bag. He'd brought it with him, knowing he would need it for this moment. In its reflection, he saw not just himself but the ghost of who he used to be, the man who had stood in this very room and promised Emily forever, the man who had held her hand through fertility treatments and disappointments, always saying next time, until cancer took away all their next times. A knock at the door startled him. He went downstairs to find Olivia standing on the porch, her breath visible in the cold air. "I thought I might find you here," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Kate told me you took the day off work." "I needed to see it one last time," James replied. "Before you sell it." Olivia nodded, looking around the familiar space. "Did you find what you were looking for?" "I found more than I was ready for." They stood in awkward silence until Olivia spoke again. "I found something in Emily's things. Something she wanted you to have, but I wasn't ready to give it to you until now." She pulled an envelope from her coat pocket. She wrote it the day she found out about the baby, before she knew about Sarah, before everything fell apart. James took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a letter written in Emily's flowing handwriting, the paper wrinkled as if it had been wet with tears. "My dearest James, I'm sitting in our bedroom in Connecticut as I write this, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that remind me of our first date. Do you remember? We walked through Central Park as the autumn leaves were turning, and you said the sky looked like it was celebrating with us. You always had a way with words when you wanted to. Today I found out I'm pregnant. Our miracle baby, the one we stopped hoping for years ago. I haven't told you yet. I wanted to find the perfect way to share this news, maybe here in our weekend house, where we've talked so many times about the family we wanted to build. But something's changing between us, isn't it? I feel you pulling away, becoming someone I don't quite recognize. There are moments when I catch you looking at your phone, smiling at messages that you quickly delete. Times when you think I'm sleeping, and you slip out of bed to take calls in the hallway. I tell myself it's work, that you're just stressed about the new development project. I tell myself that 15 years of love and trust can't be wrong. I'm writing this letter because I want to remember this moment, this perfect, hopeful moment, before whatever comes next. Because no matter what happens, I want you to know that I believe in you. Not just the successful businessman you've become, but the man underneath. The man who used to bring me coffee in bed just because. The man who learned to garden because he knew it made me happy. The man who held me through 3 miscarriages and still wanted to try again. That man is still in there, James. I have to believe that because this baby deserves to know that version of you. The real you, not the person you've been pretending to be lately. If you're reading this, it means something has happened. Either something wonderful or something terrible. Either way, I want you to remember who you are. Not who the world thinks you are or who you think you need to be, but who you are in your heart. I love you, James. I love you enough to forgive whatever's coming. I love you enough to believe you'll find your way back to yourself, even if I'm not there to see it. Forever yours, Emily. James sank to the floor, the letter clutched to his chest. Olivia watched him, her own tears falling freely now. She never sent it, Olivia said quietly. She found out about Sarah the next day. Everything changed after that. Why are you giving this to me now? James asked, his voice raw. Because Emily was right about one thing. You did find your way back to yourself. Too late for her, too late for the baby, but maybe not too late for something else. What do you mean? Olivia took a deep breath. The Memorial Wing. They're starting a program for families of cancer patients, support groups, counseling, resources. They want someone to speak to the families about what not to do, about how to be there for their loved ones. They want you. James stared at her in disbelief. Me? After everything I did? Because of everything you did, and everything you've done since. You're living proof of both the worst and best of human nature. She paused. Emily would want you to do it. James pulled out the mirror again, studying his reflection in the fading light. The face that looked back at him was older, sadder, but somehow more real than it had been in years. "I'll do it," he said finally. "Not for redemption, I don't deserve that, but for the truth, for Emily." Olivia nodded. "The house goes on the market next week, but Emily's garden, I thought maybe you could help maintain it, not own it, but just keep it alive, for her." As they walked through the house one last time, turning off lights and closing doors, James stopped in the nursery doorway. "Do you think she knew?" he asked. "When she planned everything with the mirror, with the will, do you think she knew I'd eventually understand?" "Emily always saw the best in people," Olivia replied, "even when they couldn't see it themselves." She touched his arm briefly, the first voluntary contact she'd initiated since Emily's death. "Don't waste her faith in you." Not again. Outside, the snow had started falling again, covering Emily's dormant garden in a blanket of white. James placed the letter carefully in his pocket, next to the ultrasound photo he always carried. In his other pocket, the mirror pressed against his heart like a reminder. "Goodbye, Emily," he whispered to the empty house. "I'm sorry I couldn't be who you needed me to be when it mattered, but I promise, I swear, I'll be who you always believed I could be. Every day for the rest of my life, I'll look in your mirror and try to see what you saw." As he drove away, the house growing smaller in his rearview mirror, James felt something shift inside him. Not forgiveness. He would never forgive himself. Not redemption. That wasn't his to claim, but perhaps something like purpose. A chance to turn his greatest shame into something meaningful, to help others avoid his mistakes, to keep Emily's legacy alive in ways she might have wished for. If this story touched your heart, and you want to keep following inspiring and moving stories, be sure to check out our upcoming videos. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to stay updated on new content that can brighten your journey and provide valuable insights. Join us and keep exploring stories that truly matter. I'm sure the next video that pops up on your screen will touch you as well, so click on it now, and we'll see you there.